Week 7, Spiritual Gifts and the Absolute Basics of Christianity. I'm Pastor Pete. In case you don't know, maybe this is the first time you've tuned into one of these videos, and I'm just going to give a very brief, very short introduction to what is, I believe, one of the most important topics of all of Christianity, one of the most basic and fundamental things of the Christian faith, and that is our spiritual gifts. However, very few people understand what their spiritual gift is, or their gifts are, and very few people understand what those gifts are for and what they are to be used for. So that's really what we're going to talk about this week. Let me just say on the onset, this is probably the longest and most intense lessons or study or week or topic that you're going to have in this entire book. You're only about 25%, or you're a little over 25% of the way through the study if you plan to do all 26 weeks, but we've got to cover gifts. Here is our G. If you've noticed, we've gone A, B, C, D, E, F, and now we're at G, gifts, and the lessons are a little bit longer. You don't have more verses to look up necessarily, but there's just more commentary. There's a lot of commentary. What I tried to do in this study was something that my pastor did when I was in college that I just thought was very interesting. And that was he took the main gifts, the primary gifts, and he associated them with people in the Bible. And he talked about how those gifts work in a practical setting and how they work in a practical world. And we looked at an actual example of somebody who exhibited these particular gifts. And so I've taken my notes from that sermon series. I've also got the tapes from that sermon series. And I took all of that and compiled it together and tried to look at examples of these primary gifts. Now, we don't have time this week to go through every possible gift there is when it comes to spiritual gifts. We're looking at the main gifts, the primary gifts, and this is meant to give you a basic look at the gifts and hopefully to help you identify what your basic gifts are. So take your time as you go through the text, look up the scripture that you're asked to look up. Please continue to memorize the verses. These memory verses are going to continue to be important as we build week after week on these concepts, and you're going to be amazed when you get to the end that how many memory verses you've actually memorized. So keep working on the memory verses, and take your time as you go through each day's lesson and really try to get the most out of it. Think about these characters, these biblical men and women that we are going to look at, and look at them. I've put some extra characters and some extra verses at the end of each spiritual gift that you can go and look up. It's optional, but if you want to study more about that gift, particularly if you think, hey, this looks kind of like me, or this sounds kind of like me, you might want to study some other people, some other situations in the Bible that exhibit what those gifts are. So I've put some of that in there. Also on day 4, here on the website, there's some resources that you can take an actual spiritual gifts test online. I've put a sample spiritual gifts test in the appendix portion of your book, and you should do that later in the week. But before you come to your next class, either do one of the online tests or do the test that's in your book. I've also on day 4, if you click the little tab for day 4 here on the website, I've listed this particular resource called Finding Your Spiritual Gifts. It's by Peter Wagner, and it's a very in-depth look at what your spiritual gifts are, much more in-depth than either of the two online resources I list, and much more in-depth than the resource that I give you in the appendix of your workbook. So if you really get interested in this, and if you really want to do an in-depth analysis of what your particular spiritual gifts are, you might want to order that resource. I think it's about $5 on Amazon, and you get it and you can take it at home, and it'll give you even a more in-depth analysis of what your gifts are. But as we'll discover this week, these tests are not the best way to find out what your spiritual gift is. The best way to find out what your spiritual gift is to serve in God's church and to allow those gifts that He's given you to rise to the surface, and all that potential that He's put inside of you through those gifts to start to come out. And that's the best way to find out what your gifts are. So as you study these gifts, look for things that sound and look and are similar to kind of the type of person you are, and that'll give you a good idea of your gifts. Take the test at the end of the week. That should confirm what you've already learned, and then just start to serve and let God use your gifts. When you use your gifts, it's a blessing not only to yourself, because you'll feel fulfilled in using your gifts, but it's a blessing to God's church. And as we've already learned, you are the church, and each one of you is a part of it. It's one of your memory verses. You should know it. All right, God bless you. PastorPete.org for lots of other resources, and we'll be talking to you soon.